rest of you, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. All right, so you can see this lady Aphrodisiac. She's going to give her spiel on the miniseries Adolescence. And I'm going to break down her spiel for you. Let's get started.
What is going on with young men right now? And why does it feel scary? Adolescence is a cultural intervention. In 4 tense, real-time episodes, each shot in a single take, it dives deep into the heart of a crisis that's been quietly building for years. Toxic masculinity.
Never say going to bed. Going to bed is emasculate. Cowards need sleep. I'm going to work.
Online
Now, toxic masculinity. Well, Andrew Tate probably is an example of that, not in a whole lot of what he says, but in what he does. Yeah, I mean, he digitally pimps. According to the laws that define what human trafficking are, apparently he engaged in it, but the prosecutor's office went about it the wrong way. Whether or not the laws adequately define that, I'm really not sure. I mean, if you trick women by making them think you're in love and then they do something that's otherwise legal, I don't know if that's human trafficking. I wouldn't count that as that, because let's say you did the same thing to a guy. Nobody would call it human trafficking, even in traditional societies. Okay, so I say that what's good for the goose must be good for the gander, unless we're going to say that men and women are not equal. But she uses him as an example, as if to say that pretty much everybody in the manosphere is like him.
radicalization.
Life for a man is harder than life for a woman. We need to have a lot of to be an important man. To be a woman, you need makeup.
And the rise of
Okay, now, did he lie there? He said that cowards need sleep. That's some dumb stuff to say. That's some overachieving stuff. He may be part of that 3% of human beings that only needs 4 hours of sleep, but you know, what's wrong with needing sleep? Niggas, man. But this, men do have to have, see, that's the thing about it. The worst of the white or black manosphere is not lying about the state in between men and women. If they did lie, they'd be caught on that. You lie about that, we probably consider you to be a simp and a male feminist.
of male violence, especially against women, often at shockingly young ages. Created by Stephen Graham, who also plays Jamie's dad, and written by Jack Thorne, Adolescence begins with a family in crisis. A 13-year-old boy, Jamie Miller, is arrested after unaliving a female classmate. This show is not a mystery show. It's a psychological autopsy, a dissection of how a kid ends up here. And it centers the question that we keep avoiding. What is happening to our boys, our men? The answer, or at least one we'll explore in this video, is this. A lot of young men right now are spiraling down a digital rabbit hole that teaches them to resent women because they've never been shown how to accept themselves. And the girls around them, they're left to carry that damage, like they always have been. A lot of men are—
Well, there is, in some of these really depressed online groups and forums of incels, some of them really do struggle with self-acceptance. And they also don't trust women. But by the same token, I'm going to tell you now, these guys were taught that it's important to be attractive to women, even though most men start off unattractive to most women. They were not told this growing up. When I first told my son this, he was a small kid. I told him this because I didn't want him to be surprised as he got older. And I knew something about his psychology even when he was younger. And what I knew about his psychology was the earlier he knows about something, the more he can prepare for it. So I told him when he was young. When he got older, he did not feel at blame for things that were not within his control. So no matter how many girls didn't notice him, he didn't blame himself for that. I didn't tell him, well, listen, when you get to be this age, the women going to be all over you. You're going to have to beat them off with a stick. You're going to be spoiled for choice. I didn't tell him that because that's not realistic for most guys. I told him, if they think you're weak, they will despise you. If they don't, you might be invisible to them. Some will like you and they will never tell you. You won't know about that. Many won't like you. They probably won't hate you either. I did that because, as I stated, the earlier of an age at which he knew this, the better for him. He's probably about 8 the first time I told him. He said, wow, it seems like it's just really hard to even attract. And I said, yes, son, it can be damn near impossible sometimes. And there are certain things that I taught him to make sure that he didn't accidentally do to repel them. Because when guys have habits that are repulsive to them, and they don't know these habits are repulsive in many cases. So I helped him to not even develop anything like that from a young age. But having the women come at him like, no, that wasn't going to happen. And it wasn't his fault. And I didn't want him to grow up with any sense of damage. And this is before I knew about incels and red pill community and stuff like that. And I'm glad I told him what I told him. I just wish that more boys my age, when I was a boy, had been told this stuff.
Down bad right now. There is a male loneliness epidemic.
It is pretty clear. Partnerless men, childless men, they don't do so well. In fact, they do terribly. And in modern society, that's a problem.
Depression rate.
How is it that they do so terribly and they have these depression rates? Well, no one told them when they were younger, you will be invisible or repulsive to most women, and that's not your fault. So don't let anybody come along and make you feel guilty about how many women don't like you, because again, they weren't going to like most guys anyway. And if you hit the gym and get ripped, you still have to be rare amongst men in that regard, because if a bunch of you go to the gym and get ripped, they're just going to sit up and start disliking all except the most ripped men and the most shredded men. That's just how they are, and that ain't your fault. You see, nobody told these guys that. These guys that you see that are depressed about the stuff right now were never told from a young age, this ain't going to happen, and it ain't your fault. You ain't going to be that dude you see in the rom-coms and the teeny bopper movies on Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel. You ain't going to be that dude, and that's not your fault. So don't blame yourself. Don't beat yourself up about it. You can go ahead and plan your life for yourself now from this age, and you're not doing anything wrong. You'll be by yourself, but that means you get to spend your money on yourself the way you want to, the way you see fit. You're allowed to live for yourself because that's the choice they made. See, nobody told these dudes that. That's why they don't do so well. And then on top of that, they're blamed for being single.
Rates among young men are rising. Male loneliness is quietly becoming one of the most serious public health crises we're not talking about. And for many of them, especially those who struggle with connection, intimacy, or rejection, life without meaningful relationships, especially with women, can start to feel unbearable. And when you're in that state, when you're isolated, angry, and confused, the manosphere shows up with easy answers.
Men have to earn their value. Women don't.
It offers a...
That's true, though. Men have to earn their value. Women don't. And this isolation, anger, and confusion comes about from the wrong expectations being set when they're little boys, and then these expectations being dashed against the rocks when they're adolescents, and them still being blamed for these things. Watch the next thing that Unfresh uh, Myron Stanks says, though, that's going to be correct. Well, no, what she's going to say about what he says. Watch.
Script. It's not your fault. Women are the problem. The system is rigged. Just wake up.
But it isn't your fault. And women are the problem when they lie or when they blame you for what you don't control. And the system is rigged. The divorce courts are rigged and the society is rigged. The game is rigged. So everything she tells you that the manosphere is going to say to you that's a lie is actually the truth. It's not your fault. The women are not blamed for what they don't like, but we blame them if they lie. Do they lie? That is the number one thing they do when it comes to these conversations where honesty is the most needed regarding what they want in men and how they will determine to which men they will submit and which men they will exploit. See? Look at this. When is it okay to punch your wife? From 2010. Paul Elam, he had a YouTube channel. Maybe he still does. I bet if you read this whole thing, you find that it's not so bad as much as the title alone suggests. We can actually see the first line on here. It might be easy to think that the title of this piece is simple provocation. So that means what he's about to tell you is, oh, the title got your eye, but hear me out. Let's continue.
Feels like empowerment, but it's actually a trap. Because instead of helping men heal or grow, it feeds the very pain they're trying to escape. And what makes Adolescence hit so hard is that it doesn't sensationalize. It doesn't give us a clean villain. It just holds up a mirror. It reflects something that a lot of women have been feeling for a long time. That male insecurity, when nurtured in the wrong spaces, doesn't just stay online. It turns into entitlement, then rage, then harm. Jamie.
First entitlement, then rage, then harm. Now, the entitlement, if it does exist at all, which guys are taught not to feel anyway, a sense of entitlement, would only come about if women lie about what they want, the men do the work to become these things these women say they want, and then the women still dislike these men and even disrespect them. That's when the entitlement may or may not come in, but the rage definitely will, because the rage is going to come about from deception. With or without the entitlement, the rage will come about from the deception. Most men go through the red pill rage. But the harm? Well, how rare are these cases of harm right now? Most men with red pill awareness go through the rage, and then what do? They disaffect. The violence that most women are going to feel from men is not really going to be violence unless they get violent with a man and he defends himself. The violence most of them will feel will simply be what Lionel MGTOW refers us to many times over in his videos again and again, rightfully so, and it's not even violent. Lockout game and give them nothing. When they begin to not get things out of men non-sexually, they will then feel like this is violence because, well, certain things will be violent against them. Even just elements of nature will be violent against them. See, the women in Thailand that are acting a mother cuss word fool towards these men, getting violent with these men, like what's happened twice that I know of recently, one of which was caught on camera, where this chick was trying to stab. I'm going to tell you guys straight away. This violence that they're showing is going to show itself. It's going to show a consequence, but the consequence won't really be violence from the men. It will be when the men pull back protection and resources, and the women must deal with the violence of that from each other as they fight over these resources, or when the next earthquake comes and the men simply won't help them. When the men say it is every man for himself, and the men really start looking out for only themselves and maybe the women that have validated them or related to them and the children to whom these men are blood related. You've been one of them strong, independent women, don't need no man. You just said it in the Thai language. That's who you are. What do you think is going to wind up happening later on? You're going to mess around and find yourself fending for yourself the next time an earthquake hits. And if its epicenter is under the ground in Bangkok or Pattaya or Phuket, one of them big cities with skyscrapers, and the buildings that are completed fall down, then what you're going to face at that point is going to be the violence of nature without the men to come and help you. You divorced your husband, your house falls, it's damaged in an earthquake. You go to your ex-husband. He tells you, hell no, you can't stay with me. You ain't my wife. I got a new wife. Oh, our kids need a place to stay? Well, you can send mine here if they're not already here. You ain't gonna send me no other man's kids. That ain't my problem. Oh, well, you need a place to stay? You go find one. You strong and independent. You don't need me. Now, I'm not going to ruin my current marriage to this submissive and loving wife bringing you under the roof when we're divorced. F out of here. Get your stank behind out. I didn't cause this earthquake. I didn't tear your house down. Don't bring me that stress. That's what these men are going to see. Because let's say if we really stepped it up and told these men what's coming down the pike, they would know about lockout game and give them nothing. Shouts out to Lion and MGTOW when that day came. As a matter of fact, they would tell the woman in advance, if you act like that Karen over there, to whom you've been listening on TikTok, or to whom you've been listening when y'all hang out at the bar, because she traveled over here, then when the boo-boo hits the fan again, you're going to be just like her by herself, trying to get by after an earthquake.
Played with eerie realism by first-time actor Owen Cooper, is not cartoonishly evil, he's not caricature, and that's what makes him all the more terrifying because what he is familiar. A lonely kid growing up online, exposed to voices like Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fit, and others pushing a version of masculinity built on dominance, emotional detachment, and control. He's not indifferent to women, he fixates on.
Okay, a version of masculinity built on dominance and control. Women themselves will doubt your masculinity and your manhood unless you are dominant and in control of others. End of. Women like her will crap test you, determine you're not dominant and in control, even if you're simply mature. They will take the maturity of your response and say, you're not dominant and control, you're not a man, I don't want you. And they bounce on you, but you will have spent money and resources in the process. You'll dodge a bullet in the long run. The problem is you keep dodging bullets. You know, after a while, all you're doing is dodging bullets because all these chicks are bullets, even her. You think she's going to, if she does get with a man, not crap test him? You got women admitting that they'll do it if they don't mean to.
On them, desires them, but also fears and resents their power. Katie, the girl that Jamie likes, rejects him and mocks him publicly on Instagram by calling him an incel. And that word cuts him, but it doesn't just insult him, it names his fear that he's undesirable,
Don't even let me be!
invisible, powerless. And instead of sitting with that discomfort or being taught how to process it, Jamie reacts in the way he's seen modeled online, with rage. His best friend gives him a knife just to scare her, but it doesn't stop there. All that rejection, shame, and the confusion bubbles over, and it ends in a tragedy that we can't name directly here, but you know what happens. The show isn't based on one specific case, but it could be. As Graham himself said in interviews,
I read an article in the paper. It was about a young boy who stabbed a young girl to death. And then there was, a couple of months later on the news, there was a piece about a young boy who stabbed a young girl to death. And these were at opposite ends of the country. If I'm really honest with you, Jim, I just, it hurt my heart. And I just think, what kind of a society we're living in at the moment where young boys are stabbing young girls. And you know that beautiful saying, it takes a village to raise a child? Well, I just thought, what if we're all kind of accountable? You know, the education.
An African proverb he's thinking about that diasporan black women overexploit to justify their un-African ratchetry. Stop and think about that. White British guy talking about it takes a village to raise a child. That's not something that's not a saying they came up with. But he's asking, what if we're accountable? What if it's us that did this? And that's a valid question to ask. What if it is? Guess what? The society did do this, but it didn't do this in the way that they think they did. This problem began before I was born. Know how I can tell? Aphrodisia never mentions the scene in which the character Jade breaks lines during the alarm session when the classes are evacuated to go over and just beat up on Ryan and stomp him out. Why did she do that? It wasn't just because her best friend Kate was gone. It was also because Ryan is a guy. You think she'd walk up to another girl and do this when a girl could grab her, choke her out, yank her braids out, knock her to the ground, slam her head into the concrete in self-defense? No, if Ryan had done that, it'd have been over. All the guys would have swarmed on him and beaten him up. But when he took that butt whooping from her, they came along and said, you got beat by a girl. He couldn't win for losing, no matter what. So it's all when that dynamic was in the society, it was already a problem. When the notion that men were not supposed to have any modesty or shyness was introduced into the society, we had a problem. You change your shirt and change your shirt in front of everybody around here. Oh, you just an 8-year-old boy. You don't have a sense of shame. You don't have a right to go behind there and change your shirt. You're not allowed that sense of modesty or that sense of privacy. You're not allowed that. But the girl that's also 8 years old is allowed all of that. You are not only worth less, but you're worthless. I know, right?
Education system, parenting, the community, the government.
It was inspired by a disturbing trend, a wave of real-life stories involving young men, misogyny, and violence. And the terrifying thing is, it's happening more often. The question isn't why did Jamie do this, it's why are so many boys starting to think like Jamie? Jamie doesn't lash out because he feels nothing for women, he lashes out because he feels too much and hasn't been given the tools to handle those emotions. And online, there are entire communities waiting to tell him, it's not your fault, she deserved it, you're the real victim here. There's one piece of toxic.
Well, it's not his fault. It's not most of these guys' fault. Most of you in the audience have yet to hear someone tell you that a woman got what she deserved when it was really violent. And then the other thing too was that even in this series, she pushed him down and it was caught on video. She pushed him down first. The only reason that what he did was considered the M word was because he got up and walked after her to retaliate. Now, the weapon doesn't show up in the video in this miniseries. So it does look like he just hit her. I thought that's what it was at first. And I was like, okay, so he hit her. Where's the murder though? But what I do understand is that even this lady here, Aphrodisia, is going to ignore that part. That the violence of their altercation was begun by her. She pushed him to the ground first. He overreacted in his retaliation, and that's why it became deadly and also criminal. And no, she didn't provoke her own end. Well, she provoked it. She didn't actually deserve that. But to at least be pushed back to the ground in retaliation would have been perfectly just. She was bigger than him. So there's no sense of justice. She still comes from the standpoint of us being inferior because we're guys. This is programmed so far into her head that she analyzes this through that lens.
Masculinity rhetoric that kind of plays out in this film. The infamous 80-20 rule.
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. Woman, you must trick them because you'll never get them in a normal way. 80% of women.
See, that's true though. At the time that was begun, people really believed it. I'll put it like that. It's not true that it's 80-20. It progressively becomes a higher percentage from 80, liking a lower percentage from 20. It progressively gets that way every time somebody does another study. You do have to trick these broads if you want to get them. And that's why I sit up and I tell you, just leave them alone. Live without them. It's unnatural, but the other alternatives are far worse. Trick them into seeing through you. Trick them into counting you in that invisible class of men, sure. Deceive them into underestimating you. Distract them with somebody else. I tell you that. But he says you have to trick them because you won't get them in the normal way. Well, that's true. They decided on this. They pretty much sat up and said, honesty is going to always cost you a shot with us, so start lying. That's what they decided. We didn't screw that up. They did.
Women are cut off or she's saying he's an incel, that.
It's a toxic little stat that turns dating into a rigged game and encourages resentment towards women for.
So reality is toxic now, do you see? But this chart actually shows what it was and what it is now. That's absolutely an accurate representation. Now, is it accurate down to the percentage? Accurate to scale? No. The general trend shown in this is accurate. End up. That's it. If you're a guy, you marry across and down. Whatever the dominance hierarchy is in a woman's mind, you marry across or down, usually down. You want to know what's incorrect about this chart? Take a look over here. This woman here at the top doesn't even count him. This woman here doesn't even count him or him. For them, it's a guy that doesn't exist. This woman here might look at him. This woman here might look at the two at the top. You see, this woman here demands the two at the top and feels entitled. Same with her. And then from there on, it's accurate. Let's continue.
For simply having choice. In Jamie's case, it becomes a kind of twisted logic. If women don't want him, it must be them, not him. And in a world where traditional gender roles are shifting and women are increasingly empowered, earning their own money, have their own independence, some men adapt. Others, like Jamie, retreat or fight back. But Adolescence doesn't point fingers easily. It doesn't say, it's all social media, or it's the parents, or it's...
Most men adapt. Very few do what she calls fighting back. But then again, most of us who become red pill aware fight back, but not in a violent way. We fight back by liberating the minds of other men. She would count that as being violent, I'm pretty sure.
bullying. It sits in the gray area and asks us to sit there too. Was Jamie radicalized by the algorithm, neglected at home, failed by his school? Yes, all of it. And that's the point. The show leaves us with something heavier than closure. It leaves us with reflection, a challenge, to look beyond the headlines, to ask better questions, to stop pretending that this is rare, because Jamie, he's not the outlier, he's the warning. So let's talk.
Things can be true at the same time. Most men will never commit crimes like this. Jamie is rare. Jamie is an outlier. Jamie is also a warning. That's an example of somebody telling a half-truth. No, he's a warning and he's an outlier. However, this is actually an extant phenomena, and murders are tragic, and therefore you still have to address this. So it was perfectly okay for someone to make the series Adolescence. However, it does leave us with something beyond that. It leaves us with something It leaves us with a deep reflection of the society in general. I mean, was he failed by his school? The school systems have been failing for the longest. They've been failing for generations. It's just nobody knew it. You can't learn actual, accurate Black history or any non-white history. You can't even learn accurate white history in these schools, whether it's in the UK or the US or Canada, or hell, in Latin America for that matter, or in Africa. You know how many people in Mali don't know about the Mali Empire? Yeah, it's a trip. This information has recently begun to come out. I mean, how many black folks think that Islam is some sort of think it's some sort of enemy to our people? Stop and think about that. That's a miseducation. Arabs being problematic towards anyone that's not Arab. Well, okay, yeah, you could say that that's an actual phenomenon. That's an actual trend. They're also very hospitable too. Depends on the context, but nonetheless, what I'm getting at here is that you can't get an accurate, and you could not get an accurate education for a very long time. But now they can't even indoctrinate in the schools because they can't tell these kids anything because the kids have gadgets and no attention spans. You can't get them to write. You can't get them to think. You can't get them to spell. Nothing. You can't tell them, you can't put anything into their heads. And then when you put an exam in front of them, they fail and then they blame the teachers. The students blame the teachers. The parents and the school boards blame the teachers. So you can't win for losing. That was also accurately shown in Adolescence. The schools were a wreck. Useless.
Talk about it. Let's sit with the discomfort, because if we want to stop raising boys who hurt others to feel powerful, we need to start raising boys who are allowed to feel at all.
Okay, now, we've already seen how Western women react when males in general, boys or men, don't show their feelings, and then when they admit to having feelings and show them or express them. We've already seen either way it goes, you're wrong. Now, should men just vent uselessly? No. But if you have feelings, if you have a preference, no, you're in trouble. And the thing is, one of the reasons that they have an issue with that is because they will habitually bring to you the things that bother you the most. They'll sit up and not only tell you to do things they know how to do, but then want to turn around and tell you how to do it while you're doing it. Take driving, for instance. Many women will say, well, you should drive because you're the man. Then while you're driving, they want to sit around and tell you how to drive. Bitch, you told me to do it. I know how to drive. Close your mouth. You want to tell me somebody's in my blind spot, I'm listening. You want to tell me not to back into the parking space because you don't like that. Get your ass in this seat here and drive. Don't tell me not to back into the parking space. You want me to drive when we're leaving. I don't want to back out. How many of you have ever had to tell the love of your life that if you're going to drive, they need to fuck the shuck up and let you do it? How many of you have ever had them tell you to do something, you start doing it, then they want to sit up, stand over you and tell you how to do it, but they don't want to do it? But see, when you express any feeling about that, you're in trouble. But if you don't, then they just annoy you. And if they realize they're annoying you, then you failed the test. Even if they realize later on that they've been annoying you all this time, you still failed once they realize. They go back and retroactively assess that you failed the test because now they know you were annoyed and you held it in. Well, why did you hold it in? You're not alpha enough. You're not a man. Goodness gracious, you can't win for losing. Now she wants to sit up and say we need a society where they're allowed to feel it all. Yeah, that's true. We do need that. But we said the same thing.
At its core, Adolescence is the story of a boy, a girl, and the unbearable pressure of modern masculinity. When we first meet Jamie Miller, he's already been arrested, a 13-year-old boy taken into custody after a violent attack that ends up in the unaliving of his classmate, Katie. But the most haunting part of this story isn't the act itself, it's the confusion around it. Why would a boy so young do something like this? Even the adults closest to the case can't explain it. The detectives, the teachers, his parents, they're all searching for an answer that makes sense. Was it bullying? Was it a breakup? Was it a mental health issue? Nothing quite fits until the detective's own son quietly reveals the missing link. He tells him what no one else saw.
They say you're an incel, you can be, I don't know, a virgin forever.
That Katie had mocked Jamie online. She called him an incel.
She said Katie mocked Jamie online, but with that accent, you may have to wonder if she's saying mocked or marked. The funny thing is, both are correct. That's what's so special about this. She marked him online when she mocked him, because everyone's going to keep track of what was said about him, and that will follow him all the way up into university. That's why these guys are under this unbearable pressure. That's the reason. You got turned down by one chick when you were 13. That follows you. You're 16. They all remember that you got turned. Now, long after they've forgotten that Katie turned you down, they still know that girls turn you down. So the next girl is guaranteed to turn you down, and the next one after that, because the pattern has established itself, you're locked into that. So until you leave town, and hopefully nobody in a new town looks you up, that follows you. And if they look you up in the next town over, if you go to university and the girls there that you talk to look you up and find out that you were rejected online and mocked/marked online, it follows you again. It's never over. And that is why there's so much pressure. That was a problem before social media. That was a problem before the internet. That was a problem when I was growing up. I had a classmate of mine in high school, last few months of high school, sit up and say to me, well, you know, you ain't pulled no major hoes. Now, he was just a dumb nigga looking for some crap to talk about somebody. And I had already knocked out the third person. I'd had my last fight a few weeks before. But he just got this notion in his head, there's no way that this yellow nigga's gonna get any respect. I'm not gonna allow it. That's how he was. So he started in on me one time, and I said, bro, why don't you close your mouth? I don't know you. We're still not friends to this day. But he started saying stuff. What it was, he was trying to show off in front of some of the other girls in class. So he started saying stuff like, well, Black over here, he probably gets on the phone and starts talking to these hoes about science. I looked over and said, nigga, why the hell would I discuss science with them? Did you know that sometimes they try to talk to me about it, and I'm the one changing the subject? Like, I'm really that stupid, bro. He said, well, what you talk to him about then? Let's hear your game. And I said, bro, we talk about the folks that we both know. Most of the time, I keep the conversation on the folks that we both know, and I get them to update me on them, how they been doing. I ain't seen them since, however. Most of the time, I know the answer. I'm just keeping them talking, bro. And he said, bro, that's stupid. And so I said, well, you're going to say anything stupid, but go ahead and tell us why that's stupid. And he said, because if you get to telling them who the hell you know that they know, they're going to go to those folk and say, hey, how's Black? What you know about Black? And they're going to say Black ain't shit. And now she ain't going to want you. So in his mind, because he had heard about some chick turning me down, in his mind, he knew that that meant the next chick is bound to do the same thing. This was back in the early 90s to the middle 90s, before the internet was household, especially along the Gulf Coast. Oh, believe you me, internet wasn't in people's homes at that point till about 98. We're talking middle 90s. He knew one thing that he rightly knew was that chicks talk, they have networks, Black women especially, just to keep track of who's undeserving of anybody. And chicks will be embarrassed for picking the wrong guys. And looking back on it, what I realized is that he was explaining to me how my last actual girlfriend in high school had chosen that she didn't want me no more. But he wasn't going to outwardly explain it. Now imagine with the internet and with social media, what these guys are facing, and they know that.
On Instagram. To adults, it sounds like typical teenage drama. But in Jamie's world, online, hyper-connected, deeply gendered, it means everything. Because the
Yep, see, she said it. Online, hyper-connected. It means everything. Because although he's not right at 13 for thinking that it's everything, he is right at 13 for understanding that it's going to follow him unfairly even up to a decade later. That it's not going to stop. As long as that's online, it ain't going to stop. Now, if you had, when it comes down to Kate mocking him, she's like, well, you know, he didn't know how to process that. But when it comes down to what happens to Kate online, she's going to talk about Kate as a perpetual victim. That's how deep this misandry runs. It is the society. It's part of the religion. It's right there with white supremacy in the West.
The truth is, today's boys are growing up speaking a different language. One shaped not by their parents or teachers, but by algorithms, by group chats, by a constant feed of content that frames women as adversaries and emotions as weakness. And in that world, being called an incel isn't just an insult, it's complete identity collapse. It names a fear that many boys already carry.
No, it's like she said, being mocked online, and as I said, also being marked online, which would sound the same with her accent. It's being marked. Being called an incel publicly and in written form is being marked. And the repercussions, the women will make sure that the repercussions follow you wherever you go. It doesn't stop.
That they don't belong, that they'll never be wanted, that they're on the outside looking in. From that moment, everything in his world starts to unravel. Jamie's social media tells a quiet story, a steady exposure to explicit content, influencer culture, and hypermasculine messaging. He posts Instagram photos of adult women in compromising positions. He mimics the tone of online spaces that turn objectification into a joke, then into a worldview. What he's picking up here is not just misogyny, it's a whole emotional framework where vulnerability is weakness, where power means control, and where humiliation, whether it's his or someone else's, becomes a form of currency. Then there's Katie. It's
the world into which he was born and put into and inserted when he had to go to school. That's why. He did not create this world. He did not support it. He had to navigate through it. So too did Katie.
Is confident, popular, sure of herself, everything Jamie doesn't feel. And when a private photo of her is leaked to the entire school, a clear violation, Jamie doesn't see it as abuse. He sees it as a shift in the dynamic.
He did see it as wrong. That's the thing. He saw it as a shift in the dynamic and as her being knocked off the pedestal, but he also saw it as wrong, at least according to what he told the child psychologist. He didn't think it was okay. Even when he talked to the child psychologist, he didn't think that sort of thing was okay, but he also saw it as an opportunity. Well, guess what? Let's continue watching because I want to say something about the opportunity he saw and why he saw it.
He tells Bryony, the child psychologist, that he thought that the leak would make her weak and that maybe now she'd say yes to him.
Someone was calling her slag, you know, or flat or whatever, so I thought when she was like that weak, she might like me.
She would say yes to
Wow. Hold on, here's some more.
Someone like him. It's one of the most disturbing moments in the show because it's not about cruelty, it's about conditioning. He's been taught that shame makes girls easier to access, that confidence must be broken before closeness is possible. But
she said that's one of the most disturbing parts of the movie, and I'll tell you why she finds it disturbing. Because it's true that girls are more likely to form attachments to boys when their self-esteem is at a low. That's why. You give them self-esteem, and then boys become less valuable to them. It's not the validation that's less valuable. It's not that they don't rely on the validation. It is that the boys themselves become less valuable, and this carries over into adulthood. These adult women that have self-esteem or even low self-esteem nowadays look at guys as being invaluable. So therefore, their validation, while being necessary, is still nothing. It's needed, but it's not valuable. That's why you have guys who learn as part of game and seduction that you must knock a chick off a pedestal in order to increase your chances with her. Well, damn, that's actually true. The women decided this. The men just learned it. Now you got boys that have learned this because men have learned this. So she's saying it's a disturbing part of the movie. No, it is disturbing to Aphrodisia because it's true. I've stated this before. I've told the golden sphere that this is part of the problem. I've explained to the golden sphere. I've said to them at the time, many women are simply not, that's why they gotta be ugly sometimes to give you a shot. They know they're ugly. That's why if you want an attractive one, even if you're attracted to them, you got to find the one that's cute but doesn't know she's cute, has doubts about how cute she is. Because she's going to value herself based on that anyway. I have seen this. When they have low self-esteem, they treated me either the absolute worst or the absolute best, but never kind of in the middle. Never did. But if they had high self-esteem, oh, they were nasty bitches. And I hate to say that, but they were. And so consequently, and I wasn't the only one to deal with that. I was just one of the first ones where I lived to notice that. That tells you everything right there. Now we have to sit up and look at the women and say, why must you have low self-esteem in order to treat normal guys like they're worth anything at all, like they're normal? This is not something to sit up here and point the finger at guys for trying. That's actually true. That's why this kid saw the opportunity. Jamie Miller, as a character, saw this opportunity because that's where the opportunity is. He still saw what this other guy did to Kate as wrong. But what it actually showed and made it even more disturbing is that while Katie saw herself as just being so much superior to Jamie, Jamie began to realize, and we all began to realize, that Katie was inferior to some other guy she wanted. She was to another guy what Jamie is to her. In other words, while these boys are in love, these girls are in the business of climbing a hierarchy.
Katie doesn't play along to this narrative. She turns him down again. It's a confirmation that, yes, he...
Oh, see, Katie doesn't play along with the narrative. She's still going on like Katie's just so smart and she's a saint. No, Katie was conceited. And she was obsessed with maintaining some status. And we know this because Olivia Alexa already said this. Olivia Alexa already confessed in one of her recent uploads, which are very short, by the way, that if a girl is treated badly or rejected by a guy she views as attractive and desirable, she will go out of her way to harshly and nuclearly reject a guy she sees as lesser. That's why Katie in the video knocked Jamie down. She didn't just say no. Aphrodisia here keeps overlooking that part. She didn't just say no, she knocked him down. She was the first one to introduce violence into the interaction in which she died.
is invisible, laughable, worthless. And that shame, it doesn't just sit there. It festers, it builds, until it becomes something else. When Jamie's friend hands him a knife just to scare her, it becomes the final link in a long chain of fear, insecurity, and rage. And it ends in a moment that he can't take back. Jamie's story may be fictional, but it reflects something very real. His arc mirrors the case of Elliot Rodger, the 22-year-old whose 2014 attack left 6 people unalived and a manifesto behind. Rodger framed his violence as a response to rejection, and in certain online communities, he became a twisted kind of symbol, and we see this in Adolescence. What Adolescence dares to show is that Jamie is a younger version of that narrative. What's interesting is, in the background of Jamie's story is the detective, a father himself, distant, overworked, unaware of what his own son is consuming online. As viewers, we can see the same patterns forming right in front of him. His son is also being bullied, also aware of this incel ideology. His father doesn't see it in his own son. Jamie isn't just one boy who went too far. He's a reflection of what happens when shame, loneliness, and confusion meet a culture that tells boys that they're only valuable when they're dominant. He's the pattern. And if we don't start addressing the systems that created him, we're gonna keep seeing more stories just like his.
That part's true. Yeah, that part. Yeah, he's a part of his society. He reacted based on what he'd been taught. So too did Elliot Rodger. Now let's get into that. Elliot Rodger, who was violent, who was a devil and a white supremacist, whom I'm not excusing or exonerating, was still taught at a young age that because of what he had, he was going to be desired by women. Then he got older and found that he wasn't a bad enough guy for these women. See, here's the thing. Guys my age were not told how hard it was going to be, and how useless it would be to even pursue these women, and how much more advanced our lives would have been at the current day if we had started off in our adolescence planning our lives for ourselves, because it wasn't going to be worth it to be pursuing wives. And see, the thing is, Shahid Bolson would rightly say, well, look, we're Muslim. We don't do fornication. And so all the stuff they're talking about fornication shouldn't apply to us anyway. And well, he's right. But the thing is that as Muslim women are beginning to imitate non-Muslim women, they're now acting the same. If you're going to pursue a wife, you have to pursue a girlfriend, because they don't want a guy they don't know. They don't want a guy. They don't want to marry a man that's never had a girlfriend before. The Muslim women are the same way. So now it's like, if you grow up in the West and you want to get married, the road to that is being a boyfriend first, in chastity. That's one of the main things. And so nobody set up and told us, well, you know what? You can just go ahead and plan on being a bachelor, because if you pursue them for dating in order to even get to marriage, you're going to ruin your life, because most of them ain't going to want you. They're going to wait until they've had other men's kids and debt and lost their youth to come back around to you. That's the end of that. That's all there is to it. That's all you'll get from them. And it's not your fault. See, a lot of us guys who did pick up on the fact that we were having trouble with broads thought it was our fault. Thought there was something we could have done to change it. So we were trying to figure out what to do differently. Come to find out, it didn't really make a damn bit of difference. And it wasn't our fault. They're just that difficult. You can blame them for being that difficult or not blame them. It depends. Can they help it? I don't know. I doubt it. But if they're honest with themselves and they're also honest with us, then it's not our fault. Rather, it's theirs and not. Therefore, we could have gone about planning our lives based on what we could see shaping out. I don't see women picking me if they have options, so I will plan my life for myself. Whatever money I make is mine. I will plan my trips. I don't have to even negotiate with a broad, with a chick. Wife or girlfriend, I don't have to negotiate with him in terms of what I'm going to do. Now, for my dad, giving up certain things for a family wasn't completely not worth it. It wasn't really not worth it at all. My mom loves him. She's stuck on him. He's also 6 feet or 6'1". I'm 5'10". I don't look like Michael Douglas. I look like a non-acting Vin Diesel. Guess what that means? For the most part, For me to sit up and start being planning on being a family man when I was that young, though I meant well and though I didn't know any better, it turned out to not be so good of an idea. I shouldn't have planned for that. My dad loved to fly planes. Now, if I had inherited that same love and had to choose between keeping a plane to fly at my will and raising a family, well, then at that age, knowing what I know now, I should have chosen to fly the planes. Now, I did not inherit that same love of aviation. Not at all. But what I can tell you is that whatever my hobbies would have been, I should have gone ahead and just chosen them. It wasn't going to be any different anyway. So anyway, with that being said, it's about the society. It's about what these boys have not been taught. And that's why I say if you get to these young black boys when they're young and you let them know, look, most chicks ain't gonna dig most of you guys, and that ain't your fault. And you're allowed to plan your life ahead for yourself. And don't feel guilty about the chicks that don't like you and the dates you don't get and all the trim you don't get. Don't feel guilty about that because it wasn't likely to happen anyway, and you're not to be blamed for that. Then these young boys grow up free of the anxiety that gripped the character Jamie Miller and gripped most of us. That's necessary. These women don't want these young boys knowing from a young age what they're really going to face. And they don't care about the anxiety that it's going to cause later on. Most of us do not react to this anxiety violently. We go through a red pill rage when we find out what it is. And that's the other thing she's not talking about. This rage is not because women have choice. It's because women lie even though they have a choice. They don't have to lie, and they still lie. It's the deception. And a lot of these women don't even fib a guck about what it is until they got sons, and their sons got to navigate through this. And some of them respond, many of them respond by just going ahead and raising their sons to be cannon fodder and 403 retirement plans for the next crop of young thoughts. And other women decide, I'm not doing that, and this is not fair, and we need to change how we are because my sons can't expect any better. So they react different ways. But it usually takes, in order for them to even wake up, it usually takes them having a son. Let's continue.
Let's cast our eyes to the women in this story, specifically Katie, who lingers like a ghost throughout the series. Because despite everything we learn about Jamie, Adolescence never loses sight of the sharpest, most unsettling question. Why is it that it's boys who are doing the killing? Girls are being humiliated too, harassed, objectified, sent unsolicited photos, their photos being leaked, publicly shamed. Katie's leaked nude didn't just affect Jamie, it was her body on every phone, her social reputation that collapsed. She was violated, ridiculed, and reduced to a circulating image. But Katie didn't turn to violence. Girls learn to absorb shame, to internalize pain, to carry it quietly and keep going, even after the boundaries have been crossed.
The thing is, that's also what men are taught. Men are taught if you take it, you're weak, but if you lash out, you're also weak. So at least women are told one way to go about it. Women are also allowed to express it and to lash out. I mean, didn't Katie's friend Jade, of whom we saw a quick glimpse just now, lash out at Ryan? Without proof, she lashed out at Ryan. Yep, she did. So in actuality, women are allowed to also express and give vent to these feelings. Even when the shame is based on something they controlled. The boys and the men are shamed if they bottle it up, and they're shamed if they show it, and if they fight back and defend it. Whatever the case, they're wrong no matter what. We're wrong no matter what. And if we don't set boundaries, then the women are going to do exactly what the hell it is we don't want. And if we set them, then they blame us for that, and they find a way to interpret it. You can't win. I was watching that series, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I got to the episode where they always argue, and I was like, never mind, it doesn't matter, because every single mother cuss word thing that he says, she turns around and reinterprets. He's not doing that to her, but she's doing that to him. They can't even make it any different in fiction half the time.
Horror isn't just what he did, it's the framework he uses to justify it. What strikes me most is the contrast. Women have long endured harsh societal scrutiny, harassment and violence without responding in kind. We're taught to internalize our pain, to minimize it, to move through it. So why, when boys feel—
Wait, you're taught to do all of that? Men are taught to not even feel pain. If they feel it, they're told they're weak.
feel the sting of rejection or alienation, are some turning to violence? And that's the haunting question at the heart of adolescence, and it's one that demands our attention.
I think that men are becoming afraid because they're realizing a woman's power. You're going to have to do the one thing you have been avoiding the whole time, and that is change and become a better man if you ever want.
Men have already been trying to do that for the longest. Especially, I know the men of my generation, the men before mine, and until I wouldn't say the guys that are in their 20s now, but the ones in their 30s now tried that for a while and said, no, never mind. They're the ones who woke up and said, no, we've been trying that and it didn't work. All you're doing is getting worse. See, she keeps on, they keep on trying to say, because women have choices, you men can't handle it. No, it's because the choices you make are always to the detriment of the most responsible guys. And you keep on saying, y'all have to turn around and be better, but you're just becoming worse. The other thing, too, is they're talking about what they're internalizing and the pain and of rejection with which they're dealing. They're dealing with the pain of rejection from the same few guys they're all chasing. Sometimes they get these guys and they can't keep them because they can only get them in bed. Other times they can't get these guys at all. So either way, they deal with rejection and the heartbreak either on the front end or on the back end. It's either before the romp in the hay or after romp in the hay. It doesn't really matter which one. They deal with this, but it's from the same few guys. But they're turning around and making other guys pay for that. That's where the issue comes in. The guys that had no choice, no chance, the Jamie Millers, have to pay for that.
Want to be with any one of these women. No one is settling for you anymore.
Because women face rejection, humiliation, and objectification every day, online and in person. From dating apps to school corridors, girls are routinely degraded, harassed, and dismissed. We are called—
Girls are routinely degraded, harassed, and dismissed by the same guys they all want. In other words, they can't get that male teacher to smash, or they can't get that 35-year-old guy to pick them up from school and smash, even though they were able to get the 40-year-old guy last semester to do that. So they feel entitled. Or captain of the football team doesn't notice them because he's already dating 2 cheerleaders. And they're fighting over him in the hallway. That's what she's getting at right here. And I'm not saying it's just to diminutize what she's saying and minimize it. No, I'm saying it because when you actually start to ask them this, it comes back to that. That's why. We deal with this stuff too. Yeah, you do. It's true. You do deal with it. But the guys you're making to pay for this are not the ones from whom you're dealing with it. I mean, remember, she keeps on saying, well, we don't react with violence. But when Jamie spoke to Katie to offer to take her to some fair as a comfort for what this other dude did by publicizing the picture of her topless, she pushed him to the ground. But they never use violence. She was bigger than Jamie. And Jade she was pummeling Ryan in there. But they don't use violence. This broad talking right here can't even see it when it's right in front of her. Even in the series to which she's doing this reaction. Cuss word clot.
Every name under the sun. We are stalked, we are doxxed, threatened for saying no, for ignoring messages, for not making ourselves small enough. And yet, young girls are not turning around and aliving young boys, at least not at the rate that boys are. They're not creating echo chambers to radicalize each other into violent hatred. And this contrast matters.
They're not creating echo chambers. She means they're not doing it online. No, that's not true. On Facebook, you have some groups that are doing this. You got some black women that only hate black men, and you got some women that hate men in general. But no, they are doing this to a certain extent. However, they don't have to do it online as much because they could just go to the hair salon. Echo chambers. That's what most of the media is about, right? Mother cuss word now. They will show men being slapped while they're in handcuffs because a woman's upset, and no one bats a mother cuss word eye. But a man can catch his wife cheating. Cheating, he better not do anything violent.
And in the midst of it, Katie remains largely voiceless. We only know her through what others say, through gossip, screenshots, a leaked image, and Jamie's warped recollections. She never gets to speak for herself. Even in death, even at the center of the narrative, her story is filtered through male perception. Her silence isn't accidental, it's structural. This too is part of the cost that girls are expected to carry. It reveals how patriarchy offers boys a script for their pain, one that always points the finger outward. It gives them someone to blame. Girls are offered no such outlet. We're told to swallow it, to shrink, to shoulder the shame and keep going. Adolescence doesn't just ask us to look at Jamie, it asks us to look at the world that made him possible and what it continues to demand from the girls and the women around him. I really wanted to dig into episode 3 because it's pretty powerful. If Katie is the ghost haunting adolescence, then Bryony is the witness left behind. And in episode 3, the show's most unsettling hour, we watch her sit across from Jamie Miller, the 13-year-old boy at the center of this story, in a real-time psychological evaluation. One room, one conversation, one unbroken take. No cuts, no escape. At first, it's almost sweet. Jamie is polite, quiet, thoughtful. He talks about hot chocolate, makes jokes, flirts a little, compliments Bryony's scarf. He's performing, trying on a version of manhood that's been stitched together from YouTube clips and TikTok memes. A boy mimicking a man. But Bryony isn't just making small talk.
A boy mimicking a man, but if he didn't mimic a man, and she'd say he's obviously not a man. So either he doesn't know how to be a man or he doesn't know how to be a man. It really doesn't matter which way you go about it. A lot of these guys that we think are 9AY aren't really into other dudes. They just act like women because that's the one way that women are not going to blame them for behaving.
She's asking questions about his parents, about Katie, about what he thinks it means to be a boy, to be a man. And that's when the cracks start to show. Because underneath the charm is something colder. Jamie does.
Cracks actually are his lack of knowledge about certain things because he's 13 and she just keeps pressing with the questions.
Doesn't just want to be understood, he wants to be liked. And when Bryony doesn't give him that validation instantly, when she refuses to mirror back the version of himself that he's trying to project, he shifts. The tone gets harder, the smile falters, the boyish performance begins to curdle into something more familiar, more dangerous. This moment, this subtle...
She uses familiar and dangerous together. Damn. She's telling on herself.
Unraveling is one of the most honest depictions of modern masculinity that I've seen on screen. Because what Jamie is doing isn't unique, it's a script. He's been absorbing cues from online culture, learning that desire should be rewarded, that attention is owed, and that rejection isn't just disappointing, it's emasculating. And when Jamie tells Bryony that Katie called him...
It's not that rejection is automatically emasculating and that no man should ever have to go through it. That's not what puts any guy into a rage. You don't want a woman that doesn't like you staying with you and being with you. You just want them to politely decline and not go around bragging and boasting about it and trying to pressure other girls to guarantee the same response. That's really what it is. When you're a kid, somewhere between 10 and 13, you may really overreact to 1 or 2 rejections in the beginning. You might. But when it's like, no, you're inferior, and you get shoved to the ground, she keeps overlooking this. It's the nuclear aspect of it, and then the pressuring of other girls to make sure that they all follow suit. That's when a boy is under so much pressure. Should they react like he did? No. But what it does mean is that these these women that do this are not these little damsels in distress. And let's not act like a girl calling a guy an incel online is actually a signal to all of the women that read that to make sure that they reject this man and continuously belittle him. The women know, okay, she called him an incel, so I'm supposed to tell him no, and if he never tries to get at me, I'm supposed to still tell him no. We got to find a way to reject this guy even when he's not shooting his shot. And whether consciously or subconsciously, boys know this and men know this. That is to what a lot of this reaction of rage is. Exactly what it is that boys are told to not do to girls just because they don't want them is what they see these girls being allowed to do to boys with no correction.
An incel online. It's not just teen drama, it's the moment that he felt himself being stripped of status, of control, and of belonging.
You do not tell me where.
It's not really just that. I mean, these things are important to kids in general at that age, boys or girls. But what it is that he is being stripped of the opportunity to be assessed by women individually so that he can be matched with the ones that do fancy him.
Say no! You do not control my fucking. Look at me now!
He doesn't frame it as heartbreak, he frames it as logic.
I could have touched any part of her body I wanted to, I really wanted to, but I didn't. Most boys would have touched her. So that makes me better.
That one line is devastating. In Jamie's mind, the fact that he didn't go further, didn't commit a more graphic act of violence, makes him better, makes him the restrained one. A good boy who simply snapped. Adolescence isn't just showing us a violent boy, it's showing us how violence gets rationalized.
Well, the thing was, he had always been a good boy, and according to the canon of the story, he had been a good boy up until that point. That's the thing about it. So that's literally what the story depicts him as, a good boy that just snapped. That's not me opining about it. That's how the story depicted him. Now, granted, this comes from his parents talking to each other, but they are in the position to know him better than anybody else.
How entitlement disguises itself as victimhood, how rejection becomes the justification. And in that room, Jamie plays every card. He's charming, then he's cold. He jokes, and then he sulks.
So she's interpreting every single thing about him, every single thing he does, as a type of manipulation. Every single thing. And this is what you guys are generally dealing with. When you are talking to these Western niches, even when you're not shooting your shot, you could be just being conversations with them. They look at you as being manipulative while they're being manipulative.
And then he guilt trips. And when none of it works, he goes quiet. He stonewalls her, withdraws his affection like a punishment. It's not calculated in the way an adult manipulator might be, but it's familiar because it's learned. And he's learned it from a culture that teaches boys how to perform dominance long before the...
No, actually, remember he says in there, I saw the beginning of that stuff, but I didn't like it. I just did believe the part about the 80-20 rule. He specifies that clearly. The issue, even in the storyline, is not that he got all of this from a manosphere. The issue is that he did not have the guidance because he didn't listen to any part of it. Once he got past the 80-20 rule, he thought the rest was crap. No. Now, granted, she sits up and talks about the manosphere, and she shows the absolute worst of the manosphere. Andrew Tate and this guy here, Myron Staines, unfresh of Sick and Rancid. Unfresh and unfit. This guy here, he's worse than his partner. This guy here, halfway Muslim. We don't do that. He gonna sit up and say, we just take the fun parts of Islam, not the shady parts. A Muslim's not allowed to say that because the revelation doesn't come with shady parts. You got shady scholars. That does happen. But to say that some of what God revealed was shady, no, bruh. That's what this dude does. He's literally part of the worst of it. And he and Andrew Tate, at their lowest, do actually assess the situation correctly. They just give the wrong reactions. But she wants to point at these guys. She keeps on showing you clips of them, and they don't even have a lot of the following that people think they do. They're more notorious, especially this guy here, are more notorious than they are followed.
They understand what it actually means. And Bryony, she handles him with extraordinary control. It's emotional triage. She's not just evaluating Jamie, she's surviving him. And I feel like a lot of women have been in her position. Then comes the moment Adolescence.
A lot of women have been in her position. I used to be a teacher. A lot of women and men have been in her position. A lot of these adolescent students are demons, boys and girls alike. You got some of them who are in 7th grade and they already don't deserve to live. A lot of women have been in a position like it only happens to them. Oh yeah, there have been women in this position, of course. There have been dudes in this position. Funny thing is, when women do get violent, the consequences are still less than if a man does.
Gives us that so few shows do. Bryony steps outside. She crumbles, she breathes, then she pulls herself back together and walks right back in there. It's so quiet, so restrained, and yet it says everything because Jamie might be 13, but what he represents, the unpredictability, the emotional volatility, the entitlement, carries the weight of the real threat. I was scared. It was enough to shake a grown woman, enough to leave her breathless. And
the thing is, he did shout, but he didn't get violent with it physically. That's the thing about it. The only one with whom he got violent was the one that pushed him to the ground, and she was bigger than him. At least it looked that way on the camera. And I'm not even trying to condemn what the character Jamie Miller did, although this is fiction. There's nothing to condemn or condone in real life. I'm not doing that. I'm simply saying that the way this woman views this stuff is only with the capacity to sympathize with women and girls.
And that's the point. It's a reminder of what women navigate every day, of how we are taught to remain composed in the presence of danger, to manage men's emotions while suppressing our own fear, to do the work of de-escalating even when we're the ones who are at risk. What this scene shows isn't just one interaction, it's a gender dynamic that plays out every day. In classrooms, offices, courtrooms, homes, women are expected to manage male emotions, even when those emotions carry the potential for harm, to stay calm in the presence of danger, to de-escalate, to absorb, to navigate, to soothe, to protect themselves without making it obvious, without making it trigger the guy. And the one-take structure.
Most of the time, this whole notion of without triggering the guy is because women care so little about guys while demanding to be cared about that they turn off most of their brains when men are around and they become annoying. So this notion of triggering the guy is still based on it's still based on the fact that if they don't think about it, they'll just trigger a man because they don't think about it. If they don't think about it, they'll just gravitate towards doing what it is that annoys a man. Good women have that in them. That's how I know there's a devil who whispers into them the worst possible effing idea at the worst possible time, at the most inconvenient and stressful time for you. Who tells them that? I mean, there have been times I've gone, one time I told my wife, I'm not paying for this. She walked into a store, picked out something that she wanted for me that I didn't want for myself. And then when she brought it to the counter, she's like, well, she started motioning for me to pay. I was like, I don't want it. Thank you. Never mind. I turned to the cashier. Don't worry about it. I didn't want this. I thought she did. And she walked out like, you embarrassed me. No, I didn't. We just made a mistake. You thought I wanted it. I thought you wanted it. I don't. You don't. Never mind. You wanted me to get it. You wanted me to wear that for you, but I came here for something else. You're just volunteering me to spend money on something I don't care about. Never mind. And that's a good wife. But you see, a lot of times that just gravitate towards what it is that ticks you off. They'll suggest an errand, but they'll suggest it at the worst possible time. And you're looking like, hold on, slow your roll. Let's go in about an hour and a half when the traffic dies down. But I want it now. Oh, God. It has to be now when there's a traffic jam or something. I saw a post where a woman bragged about aborting a baby because when she was pregnant and drove home, got in the door and asked the husband to go back out to get some Chinese that she passed up on the way home. He said, you were just out and you passed it up and you're going to send me back out? And so she aborted the baby the next day just to tick him off. So when she thinks that women are walking around on eggshells trying to deal with male emotions, it's more so that they're walking around straining themselves to use their brains. Even though they got brains, even though they're intelligent, they just don't like to think when men are around. And I know this because I've had women tell me that. Well, if a man's going to be around, I shouldn't have to even think about this. Like they want to shut down their very brains and be stupid. And that's when I step back and I say, no, you can relax. I can too. But neither of us gets to just be dumb. Because then you're going to do stupid stuff and then later we can't relax. That's really what it comes down to a lot of times. What man just walks around just all the time suppressing the urge to strangle every woman he has to work with just because they're women? What ninja you know like that? You got to provoke a man. The problem is a lot of them are willing to do that. I'll bet you this woman right here, Aphrodisiac, would love to do that. Because unfortunately, sisters are worse about this even than Becky's. And in the West, both of them really ain't fit when it comes to that. But sisters just be worse. Oh, and attractive Becky's. Just ditzy. Soon as a man comes around the corner, they become intentionally stupid. They'll do that stuff too. And then turn around and spout feminist rhetoric. Well, when I'm around guys, I gotta be on eggshells. Yeah, you do have to be on eggshells because for you, you're on eggshells every time you have to think. Unless it's about a way to exploit a guy, you're on eggshells just because you have to think. That's why you're on eggshells.
Of the episode reflects that whole kind of dynamic perfectly. There are no cuts, no relief, no way out. We are stuck in that room with Bryony just as she is. We watch every shift in Jamie's tone, every pause, every silence. We aren't allowed to look away because this isn't a thriller, it's a reckoning. The one-take format isn't just a cinematic choice, it's an emotional one. It forces us to witness how boys learn to perform manhood, how they test boundaries, how they assert power, how quickly charm can turn into coldness, and how women, over and over again,
how they test boundaries. She's accusing men of the psychosis we see in the Western Isha. Now, I know some of my students are professional boundary testers. And I've gone and I've told future professors on campus the names of these students. And I've said, when you get them in your class, know that this ninja is a professional boundary tester. All he does is argue and test boundaries. But these are about 2 or 3 individual guys that I taught last semester out that class where a bunch of people failed. All of them failed, really. Some of them managed to just pass by 1 point when they retook the exams. That's how one of them, the one called abogado, meaning lawyer, that's how he wound up going into the next level. He passed the final retake by a point, and he passed the exit exam by a point. No joke. And now he's in the core curriculum and he's not ready. He's unprepared. But he's a boundary tester. The other two boundary testers are no longer students. That's 3 out of a class of 23 that I taught. There were probably about 5 boundary testers overall. That's still too many. But you know what? When it comes to Westernisches with these men, they are boundary testers by default. Olivia Alexa sits up and says, we're all going to test your boundaries. All of us are going to do it. She sat up there and said that. But this woman here wants to sit up and say stuff about guys testing boundaries. Like it's just no. Guys have boundaries tested if they deal with women.
Again, are expected to sit through it and keep their composure. That scene doesn't just say something about Brian.
Well, adults are expected to sit through it and keep their composure when kids do this stuff, whether it's an adult man or an adult woman. That's what she keeps missing.
It says something about all of us, about how deeply embedded these dynamics are, about the way power doesn't always come from size or age, but from the role society hands to boys, to men, and expects women to manage. Adolescence doesn't make Brian a savior.
That's not true.
She doesn't fix Jamie.
She says, like, expects women to manage. It expects everybody to manage, really. But it really, I mean, adult women are expected to manage better than girls, that's true, but boys are expected to manage like adult men, and both are expected to really manage all the time, and no matter how they manage, they're wrong. That's the funny thing about it. You take a female teacher and put her in a really badly behaved class of students, the worst. And while she could be blamed for what goes on, there'll be some sympathy too. Now you take a male teacher, especially if he's a black male, they're going to put him in front of the worst students and he will not get sympathy. However they react, however they act, he's to blame. If he's strict, he's to blame. If he's calm, he's to blame. It doesn't matter. He's to blame. That's why a lot of men won't go into teaching and a lot of black men will not go in and won't stay in when they do go.
She doesn't even fully understand him. She just walks out, shaken, rattled. And honestly, that's the most truthful ending the show could give her. Just like Bryony, we're stuck, watching, waiting, calculating. And by the end, just like her, we're exhausted. This is what it feels like to be a woman navigating male entitlement.
Navigating male entitlement. See, there we go again. Male entitlement. I found women to be entitled. Good women and bad women alike, I found them to be entitled. I've seen this with Arab women. Now, they're very nice. I do give Arab women credit where it's due. They are very polite, very nice. But Arab women also generally like to try to keep men in their place, so to speak. Like, no, you're a guy. You can't get too close to me. And they're not wrong about that. But then they want to turn around and start asking for this, that, and the other from guys that are not allowed to get too close to them. Bitch, where's your husband? Why should I move this big ass bag for you? Why should I carry this big old bag for you? This heavy bag? Where your husband at? Where your brother at? You traveling by yourself? I didn't tell you to do that. And there was one time, first time I flew on a plane with my current wife. We were flying back into Saudi from Dubai. We landed at the Medina airport. And going through the baggage claim, I remember this. Not baggage claim. It was going through a place where you had to take your bags and run them through a X-ray machine. And this is right after you get your passport stamped and all that. Now, mind you, I told y'all I had a back injury from a long time ago. I got to be careful picking up heavy stuff. I pick up my wife's bags. And this woman I didn't know behind me from Adam asked me if I could move a particular bag. It was medium weight, so I did it. She asked if I could move another one. I said, ma'am, look, I got a back injury. Please, I'm traveling by myself. No, you're not. You're traveling with this woman over here. You're not by yourself. I still got a back injury. I'm not hurting my back. And my wife was whispering to me, be nice. And I had to tell my wife, I said something about this back injury a while ago. I'm not injuring my back for someone else. You're my wife. I'm saving my back for your stuff. If I'm going to hurt myself again, it will be behind the needs of the woman that actually is tied to me and chose that, or that is blood related to me, not a stranger. Am I supposed to hurt myself for a stranger? She wouldn't do it for me, and she ain't supposed to hurt herself on my behalf. And this is in a country where people generally are nice to those that are in need. I give them credit for that. But hurt my back, risk pulling a ligament again? No. I got other ways I can be nice. It's just not my job. A lot, and see, with a good wife, sometimes she, meaning well, would sit up and say, oh, help her. Let's help them. Let's help them. That's fine. Sometimes it's help her, and I'm like, I stop. And the reason that she doesn't get too upset is because there's a part of her that enjoys that exclusivity from me. No, you get this. You're the only woman in this kingdom that's going to get this much out of me. Don't ask me to do this across the board. I'm going to do less for other women, even your friends, than what I would do for you. This woman here, talking about a sense of entitlement, male entitlement. No, I've dealt with women, and well, I don't deal with male entitlement. I deal with women's entitlement. An Arab woman is actually much nicer than the Western sister is. The Western sister is the most entitled. She will go to any black man anywhere and start demanding stuff. Because you black and you a man, you owe her, but she never owes you. The one that rubs this in her man's face the most is the Western sister. How do I know? Because even a Becky would only do this to the few white guys she really doesn't respect. A sister will do this to the guy she thinks she respects. But she wants to talk about male entitlement that women have to navigate.
There are no cuts, no exits, no edits to soften the edges. Just you and him and the threat that he might become. Adolescence doesn't end with catharsis, it ends with discomfort. It leaves us holding questions that are bigger than one crime, one boy, and one girl. It's not just a story about Jamie, it's about what allowed Jamie to form. The online echo chambers, the
Now that part's fair enough, what allowed Jamie to form. But then she wants to sit up and tell you now that it is exactly that which Jamie said he did not even delve into because he didn't like it. It is exactly that which Jamie said he looked at just a bit and then veered away from because he didn't like it, that she's going to turn around and blame on this.
Absent parents, the broken conversations between fathers and sons, the weaponized desire, the casual misogyny that we've come to normalize. It's about a culture.
Casual misogyny. But she's casually misandrist. She just doesn't know it.
Culture that teaches boys that they are owed something and offers them rage when they don't get it.
The message that we boys and men have been getting all these years is we're not owed anything, but that we still owe.
But it's also about what girls are expected to carry. Katie's story is told in fragments, filtered through others, twisted by rumor, flattened by Jamie's entitlement. She has no voice of her own.
She keeps on talking about entitlement. And while Katie does not have a voice of her own, that's true because her character is a murder victim. This is what this lady keeps on overlooking. Katie and her friend Jade commit violence against boys that you never see them commit against girls, because girls are allowed to fight back. Even in this series, even here, both of them are violent against boys they consider to be inferior to themselves. She wants to talk about what women are expected to carry. Boy.
Even in her own death. And Bryony, tasked with facing that violence directly, must do so with calm, grace, and restraint, because women always have to be the ones to hold the line. And then
So he never got violent with Bryony. He was loud, that's true, but he didn't get violent with her. And she keeps talking about him raising his voice as violence. Now, he did threaten violence when he feigned that attack on her to make her flinch. That is one thing I would count as bullying, because not only is physical force, but the threat of physical force, I generally count in my definition of bullying. Simply verbal attacks without the threat of physical force, I don't count as bullying. But he's not actually getting violent in this, and she keeps talking about it as violence. So him being loud is violent. But Jade, Katie's friend, jumping several lines to go and pummel a boy who's not allowed to hit her back is not violent. She overlooks that part.
there's us, the audience, trapped in that single unflinching take, made to sit in the tension, to bear witness, to ask, what now? Because Adolescence doesn't offer answers, it offers a mirror. And what it reflects back is not easy to look at. It shows us a generation of boys who don't know how to process pain except by externalizing it. A generation of girls.
Well, that normally comes from the fact that the pain is from the outside. They externalize it because it comes from the outside. Now let's see what this is about the girls and what they've got to endure.
Who are still expected to absorb that pain quietly. And a society that...
Nope, they actually, no, they're not expected to endure it quietly. They're actually encouraged to give voice to it.
At every level, refuses to confront the root of it all. So what happens next? That's not a question that the show can answer. It's one that...
Refuses to confront the root of it all. Yep, you're right. Just like this woman is, she's refusing to confront the root of it all. Outright refusing. And then she says the society is. She can sit up here and put her name and face, with definitely her face on there, and give this take that she has. I better not put my name and face on here when I break down her facade. She can sit in this nice house. As a matter of fact, let's see what kind of subscriber count she's got. 25K, 16,431 views from what is now over 24 hours ago, but here it says 23 because it's based on the time that I uploaded this. I'm not even going to ask you when it was, and I'm not going to subscribe either. I'm not even going to ask when it was that she joined, because she's too young to have been. You know what? Let's go ahead and see. Never mind. Let's take a look. I mistakenly thought her name was Aphrodisia. It's Aphrodisia. Aphrodisia.
This wasn't just another fashion stunt.
All right,
No,
let's see here. No,
this was
don't want to
something
hear
else.
that. Don't want to hear none of that. Kanye's doctor. I don't care. Let's see about her. When did she join? She joined in 2017. I thought she was British, but it says here New Zealand. At least that's where she is. So she joined in 2017. I started mine, this one on which you're looking at this, I started this channel in 2015. I'm just short of 4,900 subscribers. This particular one might get 300 views if I'm lucky. So when she sits up here and starts talking like women are these underdogs, the fact that she can do this and be monetized and she can probably do this YouTube thing full time and make this money, tells me all I need to know. I better stay employable. And I'm afraid. AI could make me redundant. And I can't fall back on this full time. She wants to sit up and act like we're on equal footing. For the nuck, we're not.
That we have to. I'd love to hear from everyone, particularly men, about what they felt, what they thought when they watched this show, whether it triggered anything inside you.
Well, she chooses to watch this video here, not the one that she made and uploaded, but the one I'm doing right here now and recording. If she chooses, she'll hear what I think. She can go to my channel and see what I said about on a previous upload about adolescence. But I'm going to tell you now, I don't think she wants to hear what fully awakened men have to say about this.
Whether you recognize things in yourself, in your friends, in your family members. And for women, I would love to hear what you thought about being with Bryony in that room sat across from Jamie, because honestly, I was so scared. And I was like, this is a 13-year-old boy. But honestly, I would have just walked out of that room and been like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Because
I was so scared. Katie wasn't scared. She pushed him to the ground. He raised his voice, and she's scared. Think about that. She's lying, though. I can tell that she's lying because there isn't a Western woman alive that would look at someone like Jamie and say, I feel afraid. Not someone his age or older. No, that wouldn't happen. He's a 13-year-old that looks like he's 11. Now, granted, he's a fictitious two-dimensional character, but he's a 13-year-old that looks like he's 11. Ain't no Western woman, black or white, going to look at a boy like that and admit that they feel fear unless they're going to lie and weaponize that. This woman's lying. We know this, enough about social dynamics in the West to know that women don't feel fear of guys like that. That's why Katie pushed him down. That's the whole point. So Katie, who was in school with him, probably somewhere between his age to 2 years older, pushed him down for asking to take her to the fair. But you feel afraid because he raised his voice. And you think that an adult woman should have been terrified because he raised his voice. She had a right to be a little nervous. But it became clear after a while that he would rather throw a chair around and hit a drink than to harm her. And that's when he was angry. He made that much clear. This woman's lying at some point. She may have started off this thinking, well, you know, this is what I really feel. But at some point, she just went into lying.
because it was really scary and made this video.
It was really scary. Now, she knows she's lying at this point. That's why I use the word lying. This is intentional.
Because time and time again, even just this morning before I sat down to record this, I have seen so many cases of women being unalived at the hands of men after being rejected by ex-partners, by very similar scenarios, and it is alarming.
Well, you're going to hear an over repetition of the same news stories when something like this does happen. And there are cases like this, but they make the news because they're not that common. See, school shootings are so common, you don't hear about all of them. When I was this woman's age, I'm assuming she's in her 20s. Then again, I'm looking at a black woman. Maybe she is in her 30s. Hell, when I was in my 30s, school shootings made the news. People thought that there were many more school shootings than what there actually were, but now there are, and they don't even all make the news. These situations in which guys do knock these women off and do them in make the news, but most guys aren't doing this. Most human beings are not doing stuff like this. But you know what? Women try to get men killed more often. We just now saw what happened to Xavier Worthy. She ripped his hair out and then wants to call the cops on him. Tore the place up, and there are witnesses to this, but she wanted to call the cops on him to get him removed from the house or dead. Sisters are out here getting dudes knocked off all the time. They're just using other guys to do it. And if they can't call a nigger to do it, a knuckle-dragging nigger simp. And I only use that word because that's how these guys view themselves. That's why I'm using it. I'm not calling them this like they don't like it. I'm saying that this is how they think of themselves. They don't think of themselves as simps, but they think of themselves as knuckle-dragging nigger goons. They think that they're this way. They take pride in it. That's why these women can call them up and send them after someone like attack dogs. I got you, poop. I got you. Yeah, we're going to teach this nigga a lesson. They do this routinely. LBRY did this to David Justice. Lil Bow Wow's girlfriend did this to him. Merlin Santana actually was a victim of this. And the funny thing is that the girl that called her goon on him is out. But the goon she called on him is still behind bars for this. Merlin Santana's gone. He had been gone for over a decade by the time I found out what happened. And she keeps on talking about men's violence and women having to deal with it. Yeah, there are far more cases of women calling someone on a guy to get him done in. Either falsely accusing him to the police or falsely accusing him to her male friend simps. That happens far more often than some dude just snapping and doing something to a lady. And even then, I don't think these dudes snap because a woman doesn't want them. And that's it. I don't think that's really what happens in many cases. And we still condemn these guys that do stuff like that. I do. Even when they're provoked, we still condemn them for this. She ain't said a mother cuss word thing about these broads that call goons or cops to get men done in for stuff they didn't do, or for stuff they did do that just does not warrant a death penalty. And that's when the women don't just do it themselves, like that woman that ran over her husband or boyfriend with a truck. And Dr. Tiasan Johnson had to cover that. She won't say a mother cuss word thing about it. And I'm going to tell you, this ain't no FBA woman. She from the continent, or her parents are, and she was raised either in the UK or she was raised in New Zealand. One generation, I would bet you, one generation raised in the West. She may not have even been born there, just raised there. And I'm telling you, this is what happens. This is why AC says, leave Keisha alone no matter her nationality. Hell, it takes Indian women, and India itself is misandrist. It takes a lot of Indian women, about 2 generations to become just outright violent against men. If they weren't that way back in India, and they are that way in India. Oh, y'all ain't know? Yeah, India got a problem, serious problem with that. Indian women are violent against Indian men. Absolutely, they feel empowered to be. Chinese women are violent against Chinese men. Nowadays they are. It's not deep rooted into generations of their culture. These are more recent phenomena But you look at the continent, boy, the way some of these sisters act, even on the continent, and it's like, no, actually, they act like they've been violent against black men for generations in some parts of the continent. Prompting AC to say what he has said. Don't worry about whether she's from the continent or not. Leave Keisha alone. That's why he says it. I admit that there is a problem on the continent that has allowed certain parts to be misandrist from before the white man went over there. Let's continue. Close this out.
It's getting to the point where, you know, things like the 4B movement are rising up, where women just want to distance themselves from men because it's safer than becoming.
Okay, yeah. 4B movement, which already has failed, probably twice now. She wants to sit up and justify that. They're not doing that because of violence. They're doing it because they don't like the men that are available.
A potential news bulletin at the end of the day. So I would also love to hear from you guys, and particularly another group that I also want to challenge here are parents. Like, do you know what your kids are up to online? You don't just lock people up and throw them in prison. You have to address things at the root. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in.
Yeah, I would say you're welcome for watching, but dang, dummy. Come on now. So y'all, with that being said, I really appreciate you all sitting through this for almost 2 hours with me. I mean it from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind. We're going to have to start paying attention to more of what people say when we have the time to do that. We're also going to have to take note of how bad misandry is in other places. We're going to have to start cataloging this. We're going to have to start coming up with ratings and things like that. And I think I can propose, I think I could start something and then somebody else could take it on afterwards. But I do believe that we can start rating nations based on two things: how many attacks by women against men there have been, and how leniently they're punished if the women are identified, or how leniently they're investigated and then punished. So maybe a two-dimensional type of rating system. We might need that. We're going to have to start sharing this information with each other. And there's one other thing we're going to have to start sharing with each other too, before I close out. I've realized from this guy right there, A Life After Layoff, this particular YouTuber disclosed that it's recently been proven that many employers are sharing lists. They're sharing block lists with each other. And I'm not saying blacklist. I don't use that term. I call them white list or block lists. But they're sharing these lists of names of former employees that they should all agree to never hire. And a lot of times these employees are employees that were either let go on good terms because of redundancy, or they merely resigned on good terms from these companies. And then these companies add their names anyway. And then all these employers can access these shared lists so that when these particular former employees apply to work for someone else, they're not hired. And they can't be, even though these lists are against the law. And what I think we're going to need to do is also maintain a list of employers that are crap. I think we're going to need to start doing this and sharing this with each other as black men, so that we would know to boycott these companies unless they offer deals that can't possibly be profitable to themselves, And we don't work for these companies, or if we do, we give the bare minimum and we take the bare maximum in order to make their businesses fail. I think we should do that because we're allowed to do that. That's legal. What they're doing is not. And if they're maintaining these lists against the law, at least in some states, I'm sure they are, if they're doing this and they're putting white guys in good standing on these lists, what do you think they're doing to you and me? My name's probably been on some of these lists since 1998. The trouble I've had in America's job market. Much of what did lead to the dissolution and failure of my first marriage. I suspected something like this a long time ago, but this guy here found proof. So we're going to have to start maintaining certain lists for each other and sharing them with each other. And I'm going to start by telling y'all, I know Verizon's crap. I don't care what changes they made since I found that out. That's probably the first one we should put on the list. Y'all let me know what y'all think about maintaining these two lists. And thank you all for being patient with me as I've reacted to Aphrodisia's reaction. And maybe some of you will go to Aphrodisia and tell her, you know what, this is what AC says that we should do. And that includes you. We should boycott you, or make sure we never give you or your demographic a chance. Considering what you said, do you have a leg to stand on to argue against him? Do you care about men's side of the debate or the argument? Do you care about what men actually go through and experience when they don't provoke these things? Do you care about the normalization of female on male violence and your further normalization of it in your review of Adolescence? Does that mean anything to you? Because I'm telling you now, she put a lot of thought and effort into this. She was deep, but she wasn't correct. And she's counting on her viewers not being able to differentiate between her being deep and her being correct. Between her being articulate and eloquent and her being fair and just. I hope this benefits. As always, Black Heart, Black Mind, Black Ad, Assalamu Alaikum, Black Heterosexual, Non-Select Male Power, because she doesn't like it, and Black Patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day. Thank you for flying with me again here on Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender, justice, forever.